All right, now gather round, all you cowards and cowardettes. We got a little something from the hour of the time here for you, and this is going to take aim and take shots at everybody on every side of the political spectrum. I don't care who you are. None of you clowns know anything about what I'm about to talk about, and this right here is the sole reason I don't take anything a single goddamn one of you has to take seriously ever at any point in my life ever, because none of you know anything about this topic right here. Don't even try to lie to me like you do, because you don't have the slightest, faintest clue in the world what you're talking about. So stop talking. I'm sick of it, and I've been sick of it for a long time now. All right, so here we're going to go over the single fundamental truth that is behind all corruption on planet Earth. All corruption on planet Earth stems from you not understanding this right here. And it has to do with your rights as a human being. Everybody walks around with these bullshit shirts that say, I know my rights, I know my rights. No, the fuck you don't. You don't know a goddamn thing in the world about your rights. You don't even know where to begin to start talking when you broach the subject of rights. None of you should even open your mouths. That's why I'm here. I open my mouth to teach you the shit you're supposed to know, because none of you know it. And it makes basically everybody I know really fucking pissed off and angry. Because apparently you don't like to find out things that you don't know. I don't know what the hell's wrong with you, but hell, it's ended up in you being a fucking slave, paying fucking slave wages for fucking everything.
America's Constitution is the culmination of the best reasoning of men of all time, and is based on the most profound and beneficial values that mankind has been able to fathom. It is, as William E. Gladstone observed, quote, the most wonderful work ever struck off at a given time by the brain and purpose of man, unquote.
And all your fucking slave taxes are a result of you not understanding the faintest fucking thing in the world about what we're going over here. So what we're going over here is the fact that your rights are creator endowed. This is a self-evident truth. Read the opening 2 paragraphs of the Declaration of Independence of the United States of America. Not for the United States, of the United States. Your rights are creator endowed. This is a self-evident truth. Self-evident truth means it is apparent to the eyes. That's pretty much all you need is a set of eyes to understand this truth. That's how simple the truth of creation that is spoken of in the opening 2 paragraphs of the Declaration of Independence that you have still never in your life read. Even if you did read it, you did it for school, and you had no inclination in your mind whatsoever to obtain knowledge to help yourself in life from your prior and previous readings of the Declaration of Independence. If you're in the miracle minority of people who've actually read the thing, which is like none of you. Maybe if this was 1986, all you would have read it, but it's fucking 2023, and anybody that read it in 1986 forgot every word of it. So,
although all men are born free, slavery, dear listeners, has been the general lot of the human race throughout its history. Ignorant, they have been cheated. Asleep, they have been surprised. Divided, the yoke has been forced upon them. But what is the lesson? The people ought to be enlightened, to be awakened, to be united, that after establishing a government, they should watch over it. It is universally admitted that a well-instructed people alone can be permanently free.
It's plainly obvious to the light of day that none of you have read it every time you say the words creator endowed rights, as this is outlined directly in the opening 2 paragraphs of the fucking Declaration of Independence that you never read. Yet, it outlines this as a self-evident truth in the opening 2 paragraphs to the Declaration of Independence. The literal declaration. They declared that they were independent using this document. And none of you fucking know what any of that means. So shut up and listen here. Basically, what's happened here is that you've been brainwashed to believe that creator-endowed rights have something to do with religion. They have nothing in the world to do with religion. They have to do with natural law. Natural law is something you would have studied in school if our schools were worth a fucking grain of salt. They aren't. Alright, so basically you got brainwashed to think as soon as you hear creator endowed rights, you think that has to do with religion. But nope, it has to do with natural law and the natural laws that come with creation. If you put your mind to researching this natural law, which using the links that I provide in the description below, well, maybe you'll understand what the hell I'm talking about right now. But for now, you don't. Okay.
America's founders, dear listeners, embraced a previously unheard of political philosophy, and it's just that, a philosophy. I'm not talking religion here. I'm not talking about the Christian church or the followers of Muhammad or the nation of Islam or the Judaism or Buddhism or anything else. This was a philosophy that this very nation depends upon. For our forefathers knew that the security for liberty and an ageless constitution is based upon lasting principles. And they embraced a previously unheard of political philosophy which held that people are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. This was the statement of guiding principle for the new nation, and as such had to be translated into a concrete charter for government. The Constitution of the United States of America became that charter. Other forms of government, past and present, rely on the state as the grantor of human rights. America's founders, however, believed that a government made up of imperfect people exercising power over other people should possess only limited powers. Through their Constitution, they wished to secure the blessings of liberty for themselves and for posterity by limiting the powers of government. Through it, they delegated to government only those rights they wanted it to have, holding to themselves all powers not delegated by the Constitution. They even provided the means for controlling those powers they had granted to government. This was the unique American idea. Many problems we face today result from a departure from this basic concept. Gradually, other ideas have influenced legislation, which has reversed the roles and given government greater and greater power over individuals. Early generations of Americans pledged their lives to the cause of individual freedom and limited government and warned over and over again that eternal vigilance would be required to preserve that freedom for posterity.
So moving on. Every time in my life I've ever brought up creator endowed rights and the topic of creation, I am met with instantly with either separation of church and state. That's not in the Constitution, has nothing to do with the Constitution, was not outlined in the Constitution. In fact, the Constitution is explicitly written to prevent all forms of religious freedom. So to say that the founding principle of the document that declared our independence is something to do with religion, you have to be essentially out of your mind, aka brainwashed, to believe that. You also, those who actually do know that our rights are creator endowed, completely misunderstand this topic when broached with any inquisitive thoughts on the matter. Say, for example, the fact that you are taxed upon your labor. Labor is a natural right under natural law. It's natural rights are that which cannot be taxed. So if you're being taxed for your labor, which all of you are through both Social Security and income tax, this is a violation of natural law. Well, how do you get around violating natural law? Well, see, you teach people that their rights are civil and that the rights come from government. And then every program in the world that they could possibly qualify, including the creation of the money system, has been moved from common law into civil government, aka civil law, which is essentially slavery for you if you don't know how to get out of it from not knowing your rights, which is all of you. None of you know anything at all about your rights. You couldn't get out of a civil government if your life depended on it. That's why I'm here to maybe, hopefully, pray to God and hope this somehow gets out there and spreads like wildfire. I don't know. I probably won't, though. Anyways, lack of understanding of the truth of creator-endowed rights is why you are all poor. Money itself is a creator-endowed right. You have ceded the creation of money over to the state, which should not lawfully have this ability.
This is the most important hour in your entire life. For during this hour, you will decide your future and thus our collective futures. I'm your host, William Cooper, and tonight we're going to talk about something that is not taught in our schools anymore, that Americans mostly have forgotten. That is the cornerstone upon which this entire nation was built. If you don't understand what you're going to hear on this program, then you don't understand our founding fathers, the ideals and principles that this nation was founded upon. Indeed, if you don't understand what you're going to hear tonight on this program, then you really don't know anything about this nation called the United States of America.
The state can never have the lawful ability to create money unless you ignorantly cede them this right, which all of you have done through entering into various programs like Social Security. When you have entered into Social Security, you have given up your natural rights. You no longer have the protections from taxation that you would have under the Constitution that you're supposed to have. You gave them away because you were ignorant, because you went to a public school that never taught you a single word of this. In fact, the entire basis of public school itself is to teach that anyone who believes what I just went over is mentally ill and needs to be put away for their own good. That's literally the basis of public school. You cannot succeed in any public school setting if you do not display this attitude that creation is fundamentally stupid to believe and all sorts of other mean things that they have you believing through your time in public school. All you got to do is talk to anybody and bring up God. What are you going to be met with? You're going to be met with vitriol and hate from a place that you can't understand. Well, that place that you can't understand that this vitriol and hate is coming from, well, that place is the public schools. They beat it in their head with literal mental abuse over more than 12 years if you went to college, or 12 years if you went to graduated high school, or any amount of time in the public school is enough mental abuse to destroy your mind for the rest of your time alive, assuming that you never come to your to a realization that you have the ability with your mind to do and learn anything in the world that you possibly can.
The unique idea upon which the Declaration of Independence was based was simply this. Our forefathers, the founders, embodied a unique idea, nothing like it had ever been done before. The power of this idea was in the recognition that people's rights are granted directly by the Creator, not by the state, not by the king or the queen or the emperor or the emir or the sultan. And that the people then, and only then, grant rights to government. The concept is so simple, folks, yet so very fundamental and far-reaching that many people fail to grasp it. And they fail to realize that without this idea, they have no protection, they are nothing. It's very simple. First, there is a Creator, more powerful than anything else. This Creator endowed man with unalienable rights. Now, I travel around this country and I hear people talking about inalienable rights. Forget it. There are no such things as inalienable rights. The correct term is unalienable rights. Endowed by the Creator, not by the Constitution and not by the government, but by the Creator.
A great man once said that even the elect shall be deceived. And that is exactly what has been brought upon us in these times that we're living in now. Even the elect have been deceived. For the very people we have elected into power have no philosophical understanding of the legal foundations of the nation that they are ruling over the laws of. We have literally elected an entire bureaucracy full of people who have no foundational understanding of the legal principles of the nation they have been elected to serve. So you wonder why things are a mess in this country? The elect have been deceived. And the beauty of the Constitution is that the entire thing was written so that even the farmer could take part in the process, in the legal process of America. Even the most ignorant worker anywhere in the country can understand the legal foundations that this country is built upon and thrived upon. They have since been erased from our minds. And what have we gotten from it? Well, exactly what you would think you would have gotten from a non-free market. Poverty, deceit, lack of hope, everything that everybody in the country today complains about.
The founders did not establish the Constitution for the purpose of granting rights. There are no constitutional rights. Rather, they established this government of laws, not a government of men, in order to secure each person's creator-endowed rights to life, liberty, and property. Only in America did a nation's founders recognize that rights, though endowed by the Creator as unalienable prerogatives, would not be sustained in society unless they were protected under a code of law which was itself in harmony with a higher law. They called it natural law or nature's law. Such law is the ultimate source and established limit for all of man's laws, and is intended to protect each of these natural rights for all of mankind. The Declaration of Independence of 1776 established the premise that in America a people might assume the station, quote, to which the laws of nature and nature's God entitle them, unquote. Herein lay the security for men's individual rights, an immutable code of law, sanctioned by the Creator of man's rights and designed to promote, preserve, and protect him and his fellows in the enjoyment of their rights. They believed that such natural law, revealed to man through his reason, was capable of being understood by both the plowman and the professor.
And all of this stems directly from the fact that you believe in your mind that you have to have a law degree to understand the Constitution and understand the legal foundations. You think people would write a document of laws for a country of people that is of the people, by the people, and for the people, and then make it so that you have to obtain special certifications to understand the legal foundations of this country? That's what somebody who has been institutionalized by a public school would say about the matter.
Some of you will be angered by this, for you have given up the concept of a creator. You have said that God is dead. You have said that we don't need God and that God interferes with your life. And what you're going to hear here is just the opposite. What you're going to hear here, folks, is that without God, you are nothing. Without God, you have no protection, and you are no better than the cockroach who scurries beneath your sink when you turn on the lights at midnight. For without a creator, man is nothing, nothing. Man is on the same footing and the same basis as any other animal, any insect, any fish, or any plant on this earth, and is subject to the laws of the jungle. And anyone who is strong enough or cunning enough to enslave man is entitled to do so under those circumstances. So whether you believe in God or not, you had better listen very carefully to this program, for it was the statement that there is a creator, and that creator has given man unalienable rights, that set men free for the first time in the history of the world. For that is the cornerstone, that is the foundation upon which the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and this nation rests. And without it, it will all crumble to nothing. All of it will crumble into dust beneath your feet.
Almost the entirety of the purpose of the Founding Fathers writing our laws was so that they could be wielded by the weakest against the strongest. And yet, as a nation, we have come together and literally made an unspoken agreement that we will always back the strongest and the biggest and the most financially well-armed. That is utterly foolish, and it is in direct confrontation with the principles of law that this country is founded upon. The entire purpose of the Constitution and the common law basis that everybody has agreed upon was basically a giant fuck you to everybody in power throughout the world, to tell them, no, we all have the same power. The government is here to protect our rights only, so that they could never be encroached upon by anybody else. And yet, they have been entirely encroached upon by every corporation on planet Earth, simply because the same corporations that are encroaching upon your rights have teamed up to create a school system with the pooling of their money that would ensure that you would never understand the foundational principles of your own rights, so that you could never take your power back from them and make it so that they can't rob you blind with a false government that has been robbing you blind through corporate lobbying for about 100 years now. And it's going to continue until you reenact the principles of creator endowed rights into your daily lives.
Looking back on the event in 1825, Jefferson recalled that their purpose had been to provide, quote, an appeal to the tribunal of the world, unquote. This, he said, was the object of the Declaration of Independence, not to find out new principles or new arguments, not merely to say things which had never been said before, but to place before mankind the common sense of the subject, in terms so plain and firm as to command their assent and to justify ourselves in the independent stand we are compelled to take. In other words, he explained, it was intended to be an expression of the American mind. All its authority rests then on the harmonizing sentiments of the day, expressed in conversation, in letters, printed essays, and in the books of public right, such as Aristotle, Cicero, Locke, Sidney, and company, etc.
I forgot to speak about this in the opening, but basically how this goes is the founding fathers of America were basically Satanist, freak show, baby-eating, baby-raping, coward. Well, actually, no, I take that back. Not cowards. They weren't cowards at all. That's one thing they weren't. They were a bunch of fucking freak show lunatics who actually denied God, and I'll give you all kinds of information about this. They basically denied the virgin birth of Jesus Christ. Everything imaginable under the sun, they tried to create their own Bibles. All kinds of lunatic, occult, crazy-ass shit. So, in saying everything that I've said so far, please know that I think of the founding fathers as baby-raping, baby-eating savages of the highest order. Now, that doesn't give any of you a right to call them a bunch of cowards and a bunch of greedy. Well, actually, they were pretty much greedy. The last thing in the world they were not was cowards. They were some of the bravest people to ever live in the history of the world. That these people hadn't laid down all of their fortunes and all of their sacred honors, and their lives, because every single founding father who signed the Declaration of Independence died a horrific death, except for about like 4 of them. Please know that the legal foundations of the system that they gave us has absolutely fucking nothing in the world to do with a Christian God. They denied everything about Christianity. Everything ever said about them from a secular perspective has been true. These people were crazy as hell. I used to actually look up to them and believe they were heroes. They're only heroes from one aspect. They laid down their lives to ensure that their posterity in life would not live in slave chains. And they got rich as hell off of it by setting up a bunch of post offices and basically every city in the whole fucking country. So all this talk about old money, well, yeah, that shit's real. And you know what it comes from? Them being a bunch of baby raping savages that fucking robbed these lands blind. That doesn't mean that they didn't give us all the legal foundations we needed to flourish in a society that literally changed everything for the world for the rest of its history. The world that we live in today is a direct result of the freedoms that was given to us by these scumbag, baby-raping founding fathers that many people uphold as valiant soldiers and eternal warriors of God and all kinds of fucking bullshit. Nope, they raped and ate babies. Look up what was under Benjamin Franklin's house. That freak show wasn't a man of God.
Up until the time that this document was written and adopted, there had never been a people in the entire history of the world who had been truly free. You see, because all rulers, up until that time, all governments were based upon the divine right to rule. And the fact that the king or the queen or the emperor or the sultan or the emir or whoever it happened to be sitting on the throne owned the subjects being the people. And the ruler had the right to do with those subjects whatever he or she wished to do with those subjects. Even in the Roman Empire, under the Senate of Rome, the subjects were never truly free, not even in the beginning before they began to crown their Caesars and began to become an empire ruled by emperors. Even in the beginning, the people were not free. Ever. In the history of the world, there have been slaves. In the history of the world, people were subject to the whims and desires of whoever ruled them, whoever sat on the throne or headed the government to which they belonged.
All right, so now that we've got a little bit of philosophical understanding of the foundations that we're supposed to be understanding to know about how all of this works, essentially what this means is that you and me, the people listening to this, are the only people alive on planet Earth who have any chance in the world of ever restoring freedom of any kind to anybody on planet Earth. The only people who can ever do that are people who understand the philosophical foundations that were given to us from a legal perspective, to operate under common law and to operate away from the authority of either monarchy or oligarchy, plutocracy, etc. The Constitution is the only tool that we could possibly ever wield against these people because it is based in truth of natural law. If you do not understand natural law, you will never, ever in your life have a chance to not live your life as a tax slave. The only way you can get out of tax slavery is to understand natural law. And see, if you don't listen to what I'm saying here, you're never going to understand natural law. Because if you don't get with this shit here, well, like I just said, you're going to be a fucking slave for the rest of your eternity. Because if you actually, and I say eternity, that is the only religious statement from this entire presentation here that you will hear from me. Because if you don't enact this in this world here, that means that you don't have the heroic foundation of your soul to live in the life that will come hereafter.
Only when the Declaration of Independence was written, signed, and adopted, and then later, after a futile, vain attempt at bringing the country together with the Articles of Confederation, only when the Constitution was finally written, adopted, and became the country, the nation, and then when the first 10 amendments were written and adopted as the Bill of Rights, only then had any man or woman in the history of the world ever been truly free. And we are to this day still the only people in the history of the world, even unto this day, who are truly free and who are protected by the document known as the Constitution and the amendments thereto against any oppression by our own government or any other. Our rights, our creator-endowed rights, are protected by that document. They limit the government's power to oppress the people or to take away our creator-endowed rights. And that is the unique idea that changed the history of the entire world.
Okay, going back to the dichotomy here between the deplorable MAGA, super ultra MAGA studs and the fucking nut jobs and the universities and the intelligentsia and all the bullshit that you both believe. You can make a Venn diagram of all the bullshit you believe on both sides, and it pretty much comes out to the same belief system for all of you fucking idiots that oppose each other. So essentially what's happened here is everybody around us from both sides of the political spectrum, or at least that think they're on different sides of the political spectrum, and in reality they're both deeply and firmly entrenched on the left of the political spectrum. Okay, so all of us are sitting around asking for security and safeguards from our government and safety social nets, and I need my social security, I need my social security, all this fucking bullshit. Well, see, here's the thing. If you understood this topic that we're going over here in creation and creator endowed rights and how they allow this the government to unlawfully produce and create currency for you to use, well, see, the thing about this is if you didn't enter into these agreements that tax you to pay for these social safety nets that you demand from your government, well, see, you would just be rich enough in the first place to pay for all this shit on your own. So if you actually enacted all of this into your daily life and avoided voluntary taxation that leaves you poor, well, see, you could just take all the money they're stealing from you and save it for all your retirement. Oh, and then on top of that, you wouldn't be living under a system of false money where you're actually using money that continues to grow worthless every single day that it is in existence. See, if you actually went back to a system of money based upon lawful money, your money wouldn't be devalued over time. So the dollar that you earn today will be worth the same dollar that it was 20 years ago or 20 years from now. But we're not under a system of lawful money because you don't understand anything about legal foundations of common law that would ever allow you to reenact a system of lawful money that would leave you not needing and wanting social safety nets from the government because you would be so utterly, devastatingly wealthy that you could fucking piss on your money and you wouldn't give a fuck about it. Because that's what would happen under a system of lawful money. But see, if you had a system of lawful money, you couldn't be enticed to do scumbag things to get ahead of everybody else because you wouldn't need to get ahead of everybody else because you'd be fucking pissing on your money all the time because you wouldn't give a fuck about it. But see, that exact thing is actually what led to the downfall of this nation. See, we were fucking pissing on all our money for like 100 fucking years. And, see, we grew complacent because we were so goddamn wealthy that we didn't realize that we had to learn all the shit that gave us the wealth in the first place. So now we're all poor because we were fucking pissing on our money for 100 years straight.
According to the procedures, and only those procedures outlined within the Constitution. And they created these procedures within the document to be slow acting, so that no change could be brought about at the spur of the moment through emotional distress or through error. And that no small body called Congress could bring about these changes on their own, and no executive or judicial branch could do it on their own. But it had to have the consideration and the consent of the whole people. The whole people. For our forefathers, the founders of this great nation, would only trust their liberties to the whole people. It all started with the Declaration of Independence.
So coming back to this truth that creation and creator endowed rights have nothing to do with a religion, a religious god of any kind, or theism or even atheism. None of this has to do with any of that. So please leave out all your fears or insecurities or confidence of any kind whatsoever about what you believe about life, life after death, creation, God, atheism, theism, any of that. Leave out any and all preconceived notions that you may have about these topics when trying to learn about the philosophical foundations that you need to learn about to understand common law, and with it, creator endowed rights. See, all of your fears and insecurities about God and life and all that, they have nothing to do with the fact that your possible fears or confidences or whatever you would like to call it, or your belief system that you have in place about God, or your understanding of your place in the world. See, when you bring your fears and insecurities and your belief system into this, it clouds your judgment. And this is what has allowed us to be enslaved under a police state of civil government, because we don't know our places in the world. Natural law is the only way to properly explain your place in the world, and it has nothing at all to do with religion or God or anything to do with spiritual nature of any kind. Natural law is just natural law. You have to understand that you don't know anything about natural law like I once did. Leave your ego at the door when learning about this.
Years by the socialists and by others who want to destroy this great nation, to do away with God, to destroy God, to destroy religion, is for the purpose of taking away the unalienable rights of man and making man once again the property of the government, of the king, if you will. And this must be resisted by those who understand this principle to their dying breath. It cannot be allowed to happen. And that's why these people, these socialists, the ones who want the one world totalitarian socialist state, the ones who want to destroy this great republic, that's why they must destroy God. And that's why they are so unhappy, because they have no concept of God or of a creator. For them, this is it. And when this life is over, there is nothing else beyond that time, beyond their death. So they are afraid. They are scared little children who need a great, mighty, bureaucratic government that is all-powerful to protect them and give them work and give them food, in exchange for which they are willing to give up all concept of liberty and freedom.
I already said this like a dozen times so far, and I'll say it a million more if I gotta to get the message through. But the psychopathic oligarchs that you complain about daily, well, see, they put their money, their lawful money, into play to make damn good and sure you wouldn't understand a single word of any of this. They put a system of confusion over on you that is so great, it's mind-boggling in scope, and that is the very reason everybody around me struggles to understand anything about this. It goes against the very nature of the education that was given to you by the plutocrats who have enslaved you through taxation. Very simple, but at the same time, it is something that is misunderstood and needs to be said. The people controlling the world around us funded the system of education that ensured you would never understand a word of this. And actually, they put in a foundational learning that is directly antithetical to this. I've already gone over this in my series on education. So I already made 6 hours on just the foundational basis of education that denies common law as being something that has any place in reality. The entirety of the public school system is based upon understanding of a civil government and a society that operates around civil law. The only people who have ever had anything good in this world have operated under a system of common law.
Freedom. And for this reason, they must destroy this founding idea, the cornerstone of which the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and this entire nation rest, is the concept that there is a creator, a God, who endowed upon mankind unalienable rights. That is the entire purpose behind the attack upon God and the religions and Christianity, is because
If they can convince the world that God does not exist, then this nation cannot exist, the Constitution cannot stand, the Declaration is turned into a meaningless document, and this great nation known as the United States of America will crumble. And that is why I must tell you, folks, that whether you believe in God or not, whether you believe in a creator or not, you had better start. Simply because of this, folks. Without a creator, without creator-endowed unalienable rights, you are nothing. This nation is nothing. The Constitution is nothing. The Declaration of Independence is nothing. Our forefathers were wackos. And this great nation and the freedom and liberties and opportunities that come with it will crumble around your feet.
Now, if you're still having a hard time wrapping your mind around the non-religious nature of creator-endowed rights, well, the thing I have to tell you about this is if we do not use this system of common law, you are essentially opening the doors and the floodgates to greed of all kinds to control everything around you. Greed in itself is a religion. If you can't understand that, well, you haven't thought very deeply about the nature of religion. While you are worried about your potential punishment from the Creator God that you may face in this life, well, see, you're also being punished here on earth by your fear of this possible punishment that might befall you in your afterlife. Well, see, the thing about this is, if you're actually fearful of bad things to come to you, well, see, you should be most fearful of the religious nature of things like greed. The entire proclivity of the human spirit is to move towards things like greed, carnal natures of man. While you're worried about fighting these man-made religions that are as preposterous as anything else you might be fighting in the world, you're also allowing other religions to take their place. Religions like greed and lust for power. They go hand in hand with one another, and you fail to fight them in the only possible way you could ever fight them, and that is through your power under the common law. If you actually have a problem with the religious nature of man, you should fight all forms of the religious nature of man, not just those you associate with the Christian church, which happens to be creator-endowed rights, the very thing that would allow you to escape the religious dominance of the mind of man through the religion of greed and lust for power, aka the secular humanism taught in our schools.
John Jay said this, quote, "Let virtue, honor, the love of liberty be the soul of this Constitution, and it will become the source of great and extensive happiness to this and future generations. Vice, ignorance, and want of vigilance will be the only enemies able to destroy it." Unquote. America's founders knew that it takes more than a perfect plan of government to preserve liberty. Something else is needed. Some moral principle diffused among the people to unite and strengthen the urge to peaceful observance of law. They recognized that the raw materials of a free government are people who can act morally without compulsion, who do not willfully violate the rights of others, and who love liberty enough to demand that government's power is very, very limited. They used the word virtuous to describe such people. Defined by Webster, virtue is a conformity to a standard of right. But whatever word is used to describe it, such a moral standard is the necessary fountainhead to a free society.
So an interesting thing to think about here is the immoral nature of man around us. See, we're living in a society filled to the brim with people who are immoral, cowardly, deceptive, and all other forms of evil. Well, see, the thing about the evil nature of man that is befalling us that leads to us wanting this social safety net around us, say, for instance, you may need Social Security in case some fucking drunk piece of shit that's addicted to alcohol comes and rams you from behind at 90 miles an hour while you're stopped at a stoplight. See, that's the type of thing that you might need a social safety net to help you with. Well, you see here, if we actually had a system in place of common law and creator endowed rights and a lawful money system in place, people wouldn't be drinking themselves into fucking oblivion. The only reason they're drinking themselves into oblivion in the first place is because we don't have a system of creator endowed rights around us that leads to us not being in poverty.
We hold these truths to be self-evident. All men are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. Our Declaration of Independence acknowledges a Creator as the source of the unalienable rights that governments are formed to secure. And it is something that most Americans have either forgotten or were never taught. This acknowledgement was the very foundation of the Constitution of the United States of America. What are those unalienable rights with which we are endowed? They may be described in many ways, but English jurist Sir William Blackstone wrote in 1766, quote, "These may be reduced to three principal articles. 1. The right of personal security, or life. 2. The right of personal liberty, and 3. The right of private property." America's written Constitution was to protect and secure God-given individual rights to life, liberty, and property. If we ever allow this foundation to be eroded and lose faith that these rights are a gift directly from God to each and every individual, then we lose the basis of the greatness of the miracle of America, the foundation stone upon which the Declaration of Independence was written, the Constitution was written and adopted, and the first 10 amendments were introduced and ratified and are now known as the Bill of Rights, and this nation would crumble to dust around our feet.
So, getting back to this idea that you need some sort of declaratory certificate from the state that determines that you're under the British accredited registry and you have the power to practice law. Well, see, the thing about this is, out of everybody who is operating as an agent of the British accredited registry, well, see, not fucking more than 500 lawyers in this whole damn country have any fucking clue about what we're discussing here tonight. So just by listening to this far in the tape, you are one of the most accomplished lawyers on planet Earth. And if you don't understand that and know that by now through listening to what you've heard thus far, well, you aren't grasping reality on the level that you need to grasp reality upon yet, because you got a long ways to go, because you should very well understand that almost nobody who is legally allowed to practice law in America has any inkling of an understanding of anything to do with anything discussed here tonight. There's maybe 500 lawyers in this whole fucking country that know what I know. Maybe 500. I can name 3 off the top of my head, and I'd be surprised that there's more than those 3 I know. And if you want proof of that, ask any lawyer you know. Anybody you know who practices law. Ask them who William Blackstone is. They'll look at you like you got 3 heads because they won't fucking know. And yet they went to law school. They don't know who William Blackstone is. They never read John Locke. Like, how the fuck you go to law school and not read John Locke? Oh, wait, I fucking forgot. They don't teach actual law in law school. They only teach civil law, which is how to enslave you.
Natural law is the ultimate source of constitutional law, and natural law is God's law. Man must necessarily be subject to the laws of his Creator. This will of his Maker is called the law of nature. This law of nature is, of course, superior to any other. No human laws are of any validity if contrary to this, and such of them as are valid derive all their force from this original. Sir William Blackstone, an eminent English jurist.
Well, going back to what I said about the scumbag, baby-raping, baby-eating lunatics that were our founding fathers, for the most part. Most of them were fucking lunatics, straight up. But anyways, getting back to those scumbags, well, say what you will about the evils that they wrought upon the world. They were stone-faced badasses. It's the only way they could possibly pull off what they did. They might have been evil, baby-raping fools of the highest order, but at the same time, they were some of the most intelligent men to ever live. And they put that intelligence not only to the test, they put everything on the line to bring us this, and you can't ever take that away from them. They might be, most of them are probably going to burn in hell for eternity. They were some of the baddest fucking dudes to ever walk this planet. Nobody ever put up more. Everybody likes to say, put up or shut up. Not one of you ever put up an inkling worth of anything or what they put up to give us what we have lost. So, say what you will about them. They did that.
The spirit of liberty, which had taken root on American soil more than 150 years earlier and had flourished in the American mind, had now expressed itself to the world in writing. Adopted on July 4th, 1776, the Declaration of Independence became the fundamental statement of the basic principles and timeless truths upon which the nation was to be established. 11 years later, the framers of the Constitution of the United States of America would, by that document, establish a new government upon the principles set forth in the Declaration. By doing so, they would translate the philosophy of the Declaration into a constitutional structuring of a government of limited powers, based upon the consent of the governed, designed to secure the individual's creator endowed rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. When the Declaration was signed, William Ellery of Rhode Island stood where he could watch each man affix his signature. Quote, "I was determined," he wrote, "to see how they all looked as they signed what might be their death warrant. I eyed each closely. Undaunted resolution was displayed on every countenance." Unquote. Such was the strength and courage of our founding fathers.
Well, back to the subject of the baby-raping, baby-eating, pedophile founding fathers. Well, if this video is anything at all, it's proof that the founding fathers were in no way whatsoever upholding Dark Age principles. They often get mocked as being Dark Age, or they're often mocked as being of Dark Age belief systems where we weren't allowed to have intellectual displays and intellectual arguments. We're living in the Dark Ages. No, the actual Dark Ages are fucking right now. Like, these guys were infinitely more intellectually refined and principled than we are. And they actually enacted their principled, refined belief systems into their daily lives. Like, we don't even hold a candle in the wind to them from an intellectual perspective in what they gave us. And yet we now think of ourselves as some sort of super intelligent being that greatly dwarfs our ancestors. Like, it's fucking ridiculous. If you listen to even 10 minutes of this video, you'd probably understand that by now.
The Pennsylvania State House was hot, humid, and charged with emotion as representatives from the 13 colonies came together in June and July of 1776 to consider severing their allegiance to an oppressive government quote, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God, unquote, entitled them. Every man felt the enormous significance of the moment. In a June 9, 1776 letter, John Adams confided, quote, objects of the most stupendous magnitude and measures in which the lives and liberties of millions yet unborn are intimately interested are now before us. When these things are once completed, I shall think that I have answered the end of my creation, unquote. Each man knew the dangers he faced. Already, two revolutionary leaders, John Hancock and Samuel Adams, faced the scaffold if caught by the British. All knew that if their mission failed, they too would be hanged for treason. As John Adams noted in a letter to Abigail, quote, the declaration was, in fact, an act of treason, and if it were not made good, those who had signed it stood a good chance to incur the penalty meted out to traitors, unquote. But the signers of the Declaration of Independence were not rabble-rousers.
Okay, so, again, they were baby-raping, baby-eating, pedophile fucks. But we can't really say much greater about ourselves. Like, for all the hatred and all of the vitriol spewed towards the Founding Fathers of their savagery, we are just as equally savage, if not far more savage than they were. Because if you take a look at the philosophical foundations of the legal system they laid out and enacted for their progeny to take advantage of, meaning their children and their children's children, well, see, what they laid out for them to take advantage of was far, far, far more humane than this system that we have going today. If we're talking about things from a humane perspective, like that, we don't even... They might have been baby-raping and baby-eating psychopaths, but we operate from a place of jealousy and envy and hatred towards our fellow men that we couldn't possibly have ever come together, ever, to give the world something like they gave the world with the creation of the Constitution and the United States of America. Like, again, they might have raped all the natives and all kinds of shit, but at least they got along well enough to give us all a system of legal foundations that we could all use to live in peace with one another. It might not have been something at the time to live in peace with one another, but we actually have achieved a society where we could actually maintain a level of peace that they dreamed of having. And yet, we have fallen back into a system of savagery via our lust, our greed, our envy, and our jealousy, and all of this. And somehow we think of ourselves as the enlightened beings. It's stupidity on a miraculous level is all I could really call it.
Sir William Blackstone, whose writings trained Americans lawyers for its first century, capsulized such reasoning. Quote, for as God, when he created matter and endued it with a principle of mobility, established certain rules for the direction of that motion, so when he created man and endued him with free will to conduct himself in all parts of life, he laid down certain immutable laws of human nature, whereby that free will is in some degree regulated and restrained, and gave him also the faculty of reason to discover the purport of those laws, unquote. What are those natural laws? Well, dear listeners, Blackstone continued, quote, such, among others, are these principles, that we should live honestly, should hurt nobody, and should render to every one his due, unquote. The founders saw these as moral duties between individuals, and Thomas Jefferson wrote, quote, man has been subjected by his Creator to the moral law, of which his feelings, or conscience, as it is sometimes called, are the evidence with which his Creator has furnished him the moral duties which exist between individual and individual in a state of nature. Accompany them into a state of society, their Maker not having released them from those duties on their forming themselves into a nation, unquote.
Well, in a way, this is kind of where the monkey wrench comes into play on the subject of God morality and religion when it comes to this, because the scumbag, baby raping, baby eating former second president John Adams said this about our Constitution. Our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other. Well, see, when he says religion there, he's not talking about Christianity, so remember that first of all. Second of all, as long as your religion, whatever that may be, including atheism, as long as your religion has morality of human action at the core of it, well, that means the Constitution is adequate for your people. So anybody who is down with morality is the religious people that he is speaking of. This Constitution is only adequate for a people rooted in morality. What do we have when we look around? A people not rooted in morality in any way. A people who get extremely angry when you imply in any way whatsoever that their actions may be immoral. And where does this come from? Well, if you look into my series on the school system, I'll put a link in the comments for you. Well, the school system essentially teaches you that, and that everybody around you is incompetent. So therefore, and a lack of respect for one another is basically one of the qualifications for a moral people. If you don't respect those who are around you, you can't have a moral people, and without a moral people, you can't have a system of government that will be adequate for anything other than poverty.
America's leaders of 1787 had studied Cicero, Polybius, Coke, Locke, Montesquieu, and Blackstone, amongst others, as well as the history of the rise and fall of governments throughout history. And they recognized these underlying principles of law as those of the Decalogue. For those of you who don't know what that means, it is the golden rule and the deepest thought of the ages. An example of the harmony of natural law and natural right is Blackstone's, quote, that we should live honestly, unquote, otherwise known as thou shalt not steal, whose corresponding natural right is that of individual freedom to acquire and own through honest initiative private property. In the founders' view, this law and this right were inalterable and of a higher order than any written law of man. Thus the Constitution confirmed the law and secured the right and bound both individuals and their representatives in government to a moral code which did not permit either to take the earnings of another without his consent. Under this code, individuals could not band together and do through government's coercive power that which was not lawful between individuals. America's Constitution is the culmination of the best reasoning of men of all time and is of America. Tonight's show, folks, is dedicated sincerely to all of those people who understand that eternal vigilance and sometimes great personal sacrifice is still the price of freedom, and that without the vigorous pursuit of this individual responsibility of citizenship, even Americans will not forever remain a free people. It is also dedicated to all of those citizens who have not yet considered these things in the hope that they will be inspired. I firmly believe that any man or woman without principles that they are ready and willing to die for at any given moment that such sacrifice is required are already dead and are of no use or consequence to anyone. This country was founded upon a great idea which we are going to discuss a little later in this program. That great idea was the motivation for the writing of the Declaration of Independence and for the formation of the Constitution of the United States of America, and then later the first 10 amendments to that Constitution, which are known as the Bill of Rights. John Adams said this in 1781. This immortal declaration of the 4th of July, 1776, was not the effect of any sudden passion or enthusiasm, but a measure which had long been in deliberation among the people, maturely discussed in some hundreds of popular assemblies and by public writings in all the states. It was a measure which Congress, Continental, did not adopt until they had received the positive instructions of their constituents in all the states. It was then unanimously adopted by Congress, subscribed by all its members, transmitted to the assemblies of these several states, and by them respectively accepted, ratified, and recorded among their archives, so that no decree, edict, statute, placard, or fundamental law of any nation was ever made with more solemnity or with more unanimity or cordiality adopted as the act and consent of the whole people than this. And it has been held sacred to this day by every state with such unshaken firmness that not even the smallest has ever been induced to depart from it, although the English have wasted many millions and vast fleets and armies in the vain attempt to invalidate it. We should dedicate ourselves to rediscovering and preserving an understanding of our Constitution's basis in natural law for the protection of natural rights, principles which have provided American citizens with more protection for individual rights while guaranteeing more freedom than any people who have ever lived or who live now on the face of this earth. John Locke said, "The end of law is not to abolish or restrain, but to preserve and enlarge freedom." You want to know why our economy is in such trouble? Well, Thomas Jefferson had this to say, quote, "We must not let our rulers load us with perpetual debt. We must make our election between economy and liberty, our profusion and servitude," unquote. Our founders, our forefathers, the wise men who put the building blocks together to make this country, believed in economy and frugality. They believed it wrong for government to take the earnings of some in order to give them to others, for that is against the natural law. They believed in limiting government's spending and taxing powers to the principles of the Constitution. They believed debt to be dangerous to a nation. They believed debt to be a threat to individual liberty. They believed debt to be a form of taxation without representation on the young and unborn. They believed public credit to be a source of strength and security if wisely used for defense of the nation. They built into the Constitution the procedure by which our economy would be governed or run. While I cannot here make up for the educational void, folks, I do hope to help generate special interest in our Constitution during this program and the programs to follow over the months and hopefully years. I have attempted to identify and talk and write about the major philosophical concepts underlying our Constitution and the great principles included in it. Where these great ideas came from and how they were formulated into what Sir William Gladstone, the eminent English statesman, has called, quote, "the most wonderful work ever struck off at a given time by the brain and purpose of man," unquote. Our Constitution is ageless because it is a living Constitution. It is not just some old document struck off 200 years ago by doting old men who don't understand the problems of the modern world. For those men understood and knew that they could not foresee all of the problems and all of the possibilities of such a great people for the future. So they included within the document its ageless properties, its very life, the ability for it to outlive them and their posterity, and indeed live forever. For within the document itself are the means with which to amend it. They said in the Constitution that only Congress can make money. And the Constitution defines what money is when it says that no state shall receive in payment of debt or make in payment of debt anything other than gold or silver coin. Which also means, folks, currency backed by gold or silver coin, although that is not mentioned in the Constitution. If you can take a dollar bill to a bank and get $1 worth of gold or silver, that is constitutional money. Everything that we are doing now is illegal, unconstitutional. It is not wise, and it can only result in ruin. If you want to know what's wrong with this country, look at what is happening in the country. Look at what is being done, and then read the Constitution and compare the two, and you will see. Look at the principles of our founding fathers, and then look at the welfare state, and you will see. For the welfare state did not exist until it was created. Folks, I wrote a book called Behold a Pale Horse, and it opens most of the doors to the puzzles that you've all been baffled by. It puts the pieces together for the first time in history. It's 500 pages of the most well-documented suppressed information ever printed in the history of the world. And it can be yours for $25, plus $5 postage and handling if you're not a CAGI member.
All right, so that's it. That ziggity, that's all, folks. Well, anyways, not that's all yet, because I'm going to talk a little bit about Bill Cooper here. So, Bill Cooper is the man who created this series here. He literally died for making this. He died years after making this specific tape here, but he died for what he was doing on the radio. He was murdered by the state for doing it. He's essentially the guy who taught me everything I know in the world. I pretty much consider him to be my father. You should really look into everything he ever did, because there is not many subjects that he didn't teach the truth about through extensive research, as well as verification of that research by multiple parties. Everything you're hearing from this man is meticulously sourced and documented on a level that is untouchable. And that is the reason he was killed. He was teaching people more than they should have known. And quite frankly, my goal is to end up just like him. Because fuck this fucking police state bullshit we got going on. I'd rather be fucking dead in heaven than fucking living through all this fucking tax slavery bullshit that we got to live through. So, I mean, getting back to my point here about Bill, well, you should look into everything he ever did. I'll put a link to plenty of material from him. I'll put a link to the specific playlists that you can use to learn about various topics that are incredibly important, many of which I'm going to cover eventually here. So that's what I got to say about Bill Cooper here. Bill Cooper is my hero in the world. He is the great, well, after Jesus Christ, there is no, and in God, there's nobody else that I respect more in this world than Bill Cooper. Pretty much, never met the guy, but he's the only person I would ever consider to be my family in the world. I mean, there's certainly other people that could potentially fill that role. But as of right now, he's probably the only person in the world, and he's dead, that I would ever trust with anything, ever. Because he's the only person of principle that I've ever met other than myself. The rest of you are a bunch of sellouts, and that's more or less why we've gotten into this predicament that we've gotten into here, where we don't even know our own rights and we've been enslaved because of it. See, if you weren't a sellout, you wouldn't be that. So, that's what I got to say about that.